Entire Class 9 combat test broke. Deathworld Girl complained it was finished too fast. The alarm in Coordinator Vexel's office had never sounded like this before. It was not a loud alarm. That was the first wrong thing. The Class 9 breach tone was supposed to be a full station alert, a sound that would clear corridors and wake assessment officers from sleep. What Vexel heard instead was a soft, single chime, almost polite, from the panel above his desk. He looked at it. The panel read, Combat Assessment Sector 9 Safety Parameter Exceeded. Test duration, 7 minutes. 7 minutes. He stood up so fast he knocked his tea off the desk. The Class 9 combat assessment was designed to run for a minimum of 4 hours. The Drenar Warmaster, who had held the all-species record, had taken 6 hours and 12 minutes. Species were expected to clear it over multiple sessions. No species had ever triggered the breach tone at the 7-minute mark, because the breach tone only fired when a candidate had deactivated all hostiles before the chamber's automated threat escalation sequence could complete. The sequence was rated to take 8 hours. 7 minutes. Vexel was in the corridor before he had put on his outer robe. His 3 hearts, each one independent, each one capable of sustaining him alone if the other 2 failed, were beating at 3 separate speeds, which only happened when his body could not agree on how frightened to be. He ran. The observation deck for Sector 9 was at the end of a long service corridor. 2 technicians passed him going the other way. Both of them were pale. Neither spoke. One of them, he noticed, was still holding a data stylus at an angle that made no physical sense. She had forgotten she was holding it, or forgotten how hands worked. He pushed through the observation door. The deck was silent. That was the second wrong thing. Normally, the observation deck for a live Class 9 assessment was loud, commentary, biometric callouts, the background thunder of whatever the chamber was throwing at a candidate. Now it was 8 officers and technicians standing in a loose arc around the main feed screen, not making a sound. Clichter, his senior assessment officer, stood closest to the screen. All 4 of his eyes were open. This was significant because Clichter was not an organism that opened all 4 eyes at once. 2 front, 2 back. That was how Clichter moved through the galaxy. Right now he was operating on full 4-point visual, and he did not appear to have noticed. Vexel turned to look at the screen. Inside the testing chamber, a space that covered 6,000 square meters and was pressure-rated, gravity variable, and had reduced 4 confirmed apex warrior species to requesting emergency extraction. A small human female was standing in the middle of the floor. She was perhaps 1.5 meters tall, brown hair pulled back from her face, simple black fatigues, no armor plating, no enhancement harness. She had a blade in her right hand that was approximately the length of one of his fingers. Around her on the floor, 12 combat drones, all deactivated. The entire first wave of a Class 9 assessment. They were not damaged in any dramatic way. They were simply no longer operating, scattered in a rough circle around where she stood, like someone had turned off a set of lights. She was not breathing hard. She was looking at the blade, then wiping it on a small cloth she had produced from her pocket, with the economy of someone cleaning a kitchen knife after cutting vegetables. The screen in the corner read, Test duration, 7 minutes 14 seconds. Wave 1 complete. Vexel's third heart lurched out of sync with the other 2. Clichter, he said. His voice came out at a lower volume than he intended. Sir, show me her biometrics. Clichter touched the secondary panel. The numbers appeared: heart rate, respiration, cortisol, adrenaline, neural activity. Vexel read them. He read them again. She was calm as a garden. Not trained calm, not combat-suppressed calm. The numbers read like a woman sitting in a waiting room with a cup of tea. Heart rate nominal, respiration nominal, cortisol at baseline, not a single stress marker elevated. The sensors are working, Clichter said, answering the question Vexel had not asked yet. I know, Vexel said. He did not know. He was not sure of anything. He pulled her file on the secondary terminal. Lieutenant Lily Carter, 24, Manchester, Earth. Junior officer. No cybernetic enhancements. No genetic modifications. No special forces designation. No accelerated training program. No confirmed warrior species classification. She had applied 3 days ago through the Bureau's standard intake process. She had brought, he scrolled to the notes section, a paper bag of biscuits her mother had baked, which she offered to the reception officer and the 2 technicians who processed her intake forms. She had asked to skip directly to Class 9. Vexel remembered reading that line. He had laughed. He remembered being kind about the laugh, muffling it into a professional smile, because the human had seemed very earnest about the request and he had not wanted to embarrass her. He had approved the request because to deny it would have meant processing the rejection through 7 forms across 3 departments, and she was very young and did not present any physical risk to Bureau property. And if she wanted to spend an afternoon being safely extracted from a Class 9 chamber, that was her own business. He had written in the file, "Candidate appears to be operating under a misapprehension regarding the difficulty scale. Recommend she be offered standard intake counseling following extraction." He had then written, "Note, candidate declines standard issue equipment. Retains 1 personal blade, non-standard, approximately 9 cm, non-regulation, will not be sufficient for Class 9 conditions." He had almost added a comment about the blade. He had decided it was not worth the notation space. On the screen, Lily Carter finished wiping the blade and put the cloth away. She looked around the chamber the way someone looks around an unfamiliar restaurant, taking stock of the layout. Then she looked directly up at the observation camera, the one mounted above the secondary feed, the one she could not possibly have known the position of from inside the chamber, and said clearly, in a tone of mild inquiry, "Is there a second section, or should I wait here?" Threxar, the decorated Vulcan warrior who was observing the assessment for research purposes, and who had told Vexel during the intake briefing that he would give the human 30 seconds before the emergency retrieval sequence was required, made a sound that his translation chip rendered as approximately "I see," but which, from the context, did not appear to mean that. Vexel pressed the chamber intercom. He was going to say, "Yes, Section 2 will begin shortly." What came out was, "We are preparing the next section." "Wonderful," she said. "Thank you, no rush." If the blended CTA were placed here, she went back to checking her blade. Something was wrong about how calm she was. Stay close, this is the part that gets harder to explain. 3 days ago this woman had walked into his office with cookies from her mother. She had sat down across from him, brushed a crumb off her knee, and said she hoped to complete the full assessment by mid-afternoon because she had a video call scheduled with her mother at 3 o'clock and did not want to be late. He had found that charming. He had found her charming. Young species new to interstellar contact, eager to prove themselves, he had seen it before, had always found it endearing, the way they arrived with no sense of the scale of what they were walking into. He looked at the screen. 12 deactivated drones, 7 minutes. "Clicker," he said, "get Director Viscara." "Sir, the director is in the middle of the quarterly." "Get Director Viscara," Vexel said again. His voice came out flat and quiet in the way that, after 300 years, his staff had learned meant something worse than shouting. "Tell her the entire combat assessment program may need rewriting. Tell her she will want to see this before she reads about it in a report." Clicker left. On the second terminal, Vexel pulled Lily Carter's file again. He had read it 4 times in the last 2 days, initially to prepare for her intake meeting, then twice more out of a mild professional curiosity about what kind of person asked to skip directly to Class 9 without any prior confirmed warrior status. He read it now with different eyes. Junior lieutenant, no modifications, no enhancements. She had listed in the section marked relevant training the following: 6 years standard military service, wilderness survival certification, first aid, rock climbing, a note in her own handwriting on the supplementary form: "We do a lot of training. I find it quite useful." That was all. He looked at the blade log again. Non-standard, approximately 9 cm. Non-regulation. Will not be sufficient for Class 9 conditions. He had been right that it was non-standard. He had been wrong about everything else. The second section of the assessment was already loading. It was the gravity well shifting gravity planes, plasma drones from every surface including the ceiling, a central pit that pulled. Most species fell. The ones that didn't fell eventually. The section had a notional pass rate of around 14% for candidates who reached it, and of those, most required extraction before completion. On the feed, Lily Carter was rolling her shoulders. Slowly, once, like someone preparing for a light jog. Vexel's hands were flat on the console. The gravity well deployed. The gravity well section had been designed by a team of 12 engineers over 4 years. Vexel knew this because he had attended the design presentation. The lead engineer had explained, with considerable pride, that the shifting gravity planes made it effectively impossible for any biologically standard candidate to maintain a consistent orientation for more than 3 seconds. The central pit had a pull rated at twice standard gravity. The plasma drones, mounted on all 6 surfaces including ceiling and floor, could track heat signatures through any known species' evasive movement pattern. The section had, in testing on willing volunteer candidates of confirmed warrior species, produced a 100% extraction rate in the first 6 months of operation before the engineers agreed to reduce the plasma output slightly. Lily looked up at the ceiling. She tilted her head the way a person might tilt their head at an unusual painting in a gallery, not alarmed, not calculating, just noticing. The gravity shifted, the floor became lighter, the ceiling became heavier. Plasma drones opened from hatches on every surface, 8 of them, tracking immediately. The central pit yawned. She ran at the wall. Not toward an exit, not away from the nearest drone. At the wall directly, at a pace that was not a sprint and not a jog but something in between, the kind of speed a person uses when they are trying to get somewhere without being rude about it. She hit the wall at a low angle and kept running. Up it. The shift in gravity pulled her sideways. She adjusted without looking down, redistributing weight across her feet in small corrections that the sensors logged as 43 individual micro-adjustments in under 2 seconds. She was on the ceiling in 4 seconds. On the ceiling she paused, just for a moment, like someone who had reached the top of a staircase and needed to check which door they wanted. The drones tracked her. She was looking at the nearest one. Then she reached out, took hold of it by the housing bracket, and used it as a shield for the other 7. The remaining drones registered the housing bracket as a target obstacle and began recalibrating. That took 2.1 seconds. In those 2.1 seconds she moved through the ceiling drones in a sequence that the replay cameras, reviewed later on 4 separate occasions, could not fully capture because she was always 1 step ahead of whatever the lens expected. 12 seconds. The section read, "All hostiles deactivated." She was standing on the ceiling, upside down relative to the chamber's nominal orientation, looking around as if she had put something down somewhere and wasn't quite sure where. A small line appeared between her brows, the expression of someone who has just remembered a minor task. Her voice came through the chamber audio, clear, apologetic. "Excuse me, is there water in here anywhere? I forgot my bottle and my throat's getting a bit dry." No one in the observation room made a sound. "No water, fair enough. Sorry to bother you, I'll manage." She dropped from the ceiling in a smooth, controlled fall, tucking one shoulder at the last moment, and came up out of the roll already walking toward the next section door. Clichter said very quietly, "She asked for water. like she was at a coffee shop. Vexel did not respond. His voice was not available to him at that moment. He pulled the section timer. 12 seconds. The previous recorded fastest completion of the gravity well section was 4 minutes and 7 seconds, set by a Krell battle master in a controlled evaluation 3 years ago. It was the record Vexel had been proudest of when the Bureau had verified it. He had sent a commendation to the Krell Confederacy. 12 seconds. He put his hands flat on the console, then took them off again because that was not a professional posture, then put them back because he needed something to hold on to. Director Viscara arrived. She was a small person by the standards of her species, compact, careful, 80 years in post at the Bureau, the kind of administrator who had survived 8 different galactic political transitions by the simple method of being correct about everything slightly before everyone else. She had been briefed in transit. Her expression, when she came through the observation deck door, was the expression of someone who had been told something was impossible and was prepared to see for themselves. She looked at the screen. She looked at Vexel. When did this start? 19 minutes ago, Vexel said. She has been inside for 19 minutes. Yes. Director Viscara looked back at the screen. On the feed, Lily had entered the urban environment section, a large multi-floor simulation of an inhabited city district, with hidden traps, concealed weapon emplacements, and enemy positions on every floor. The section's benchmark was held by a Drenar Warmaster who had cleared it in 3 hours. The Drenar had described it afterward as the most difficult task of a distinguished 60-year military career. Lily was not moving fast. That was the first thing Vexel noticed and could not explain. She was walking, a calm, unhurried walk, the way a person walks through an unfamiliar town when they have the afternoon free. She was not using the plasma rifle she had picked up off a deactivated unit in the first section. She appeared to have set it against a wall. She had the blade. A trap plate triggered under her left foot. She stepped off it in the same movement, smooth and continuous, without breaking stride, without looking down. Not avoiding it, she had stepped directly onto the plate and stepped off before the activation sequence completed. The tolerance was under half a second. She saw it, an observer said. From that angle, another said. Vexel replayed the footage. She had not been looking at the floor. She had been looking at the floor above, at a window where an enemy position had not yet revealed itself. She went up 2 floors. She avoided 3 more traps. Cameras on the upper levels had difficulty capturing the engagements. They happened very quickly, and in each one she used the smallest possible movement as if she were conserving something. Not energy, something else. She never used more than was needed. She hit nothing she did not mean to hit, and she hit it once. She was also, Clichter reported, humming. Identify it, Vexel said. Clichter ran the audio through the cultural database. This took longer than Vexel expected. It's called You Are My Sunshine, Clichter said. It's a human song. Old, it's categorized as a he checked the screen. A lullaby. A lullaby, Vexel said. Yes, sir, the kind sung to children, specifically to very small children, to help them sleep. On the feed, Lily was humming a song for small children while clearing a combat evaluation that had caused decorated military veterans of multiple species to require psychological support services after completion. Threxar, the Vulcan warrior, the 3-conflict veteran, the person who had told Vexel that the human would not last 30 seconds in Wave 1, had sat down on the bench at the back of the observation deck. His hands were on his knees. His skin, which was naturally a dark gold, had gone slightly gray. He was watching the screen with an expression that Vexel had no category for. One of the observation cameras zoomed in on Lily as she paused at a window on the 3rd floor. She had taken out the notebook. She was writing in it. The camera sharpened on the page. The handwriting was small and clear. Tell Marcus about the ceiling lights, he'd love this. Director Viscara said, "Who is Marcus?" Vexel checked the file. "Her brother, he's studying architecture, Cambridge." A silence. "She is taking interior design notes," Director Viscara said, not as a question, for her brother, while completing a section that the Drenar Warmaster described as the most difficult thing he had ever done. "Yes," Vexel said. Another silence. Director Viscara's expression had undergone a subtle change. She was still composed, she was always composed, but something behind her eyes had shifted, and Vexel recognized it because he had felt it himself about 11 minutes ago. It was the expression of a person who has understood that the categories they thought were fixed are not fixed, and is not sure yet what to do with that information. "What does she think this is?" Director Viscara said very quietly. Vexel did not have an answer. On the screen, Lily finished her note, put the notebook away, and continued through the section. The lullaby resumed. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine, faint, tuneless in the way of people who hum without thinking about it, under the breath." The section cleared in a time Vexel's system initially flagged as a data error. It was not a data error. He filed the first urgent transmission to the Galactic Council. He worded it carefully, preliminary observations only, assessment ongoing, further data forthcoming, no conclusions yet. He did not know what conclusions to draw. He knew what he was watching. He did not know yet what it meant. He was beginning to form a theory. He did not want to form the theory because once formed it would have to be evaluated, and if it proved correct, he would have to do something with it, and he did not know what that would be. The Zorvath Apex Stalker section loaded. Vexel had overseen the introduction of the Zorvath Apex Stalker to the Class 9 assessment 16 years ago. He had argued for it in a 3-hour presentation to the Bureau Board. The Stalker was 4 meters tall, 4-armed, capable of bending light around itself, so that it was effectively invisible in most combat conditions. Its success rate against trained warrior species candidates was 94%. The remaining 6%, the ones who had defeated it, had mostly done so at significant personal cost, and the fastest of them, Satra the Unbroken, had taken 41 minutes. Satra was widely regarded as one of the most dangerous individual combatants in the confirmed galaxy. Lily was still in the entry corridor when the Stalker deployed in the main space ahead of her. She stopped writing in her notebook, slowly. She put the notebook in her pocket. She produced a piece of gum from another pocket. She began to chew. She had not turned around. She was facing forward down the corridor. "I can hear you breathing," she said. The Stalker attacked from full camouflage at a distance of 10 meters. Lily was not there. She had moved sideways, not jumped, not rolled, just stepped, a small adjustment of maybe half a meter, and the Stalker's lead arm passed through the air where she had been standing. She ended up slightly to its left, looking at the side of its head. "You're very quiet, honestly," she said. "Very impressive. But you're breathing through your mouth and your lungs are quite large. I could hear you from about 12 meters. Just something to think about for next time." The Stalker drove its second arm at her in a lateral sweep that had, in all previous engagements with all previous candidates, ended the encounter. Both figures blurred on the camera. When the frame clarified, Lily was on the Stalker's back, one hand on the back of its head, holding it still with a grip that the force sensors registered as applying exactly the right amount of pressure. Not more, not less. "That was a very good try," she said, almost to herself. "You very nearly had me with that one." She located a specific point on the back of the neck. She applied precise pressure. The yellow eyes dimmed. The Stalker lowered itself to the floor. Engagement time, 47 seconds. Director Viscara sat down in the chair next to Vexel. She did it slowly, like a person who has decided that the standing position is no longer tenable, but would prefer not to make a production of choosing to sit. Vexel noticed, because it was the first time in 8 years of working with her that he had seen her sit without first deciding to sit. On the back bench, Threxar said something in his own language. The translation chip offered three possible renders and then, apparently concluding that none of them was accurate, produced nothing. Threxar had bet his career on this woman not lasting 30 seconds. He had made the bet publicly, in front of 6 other observers, over the intake report. His face had gone the specific gray of a person who has been shown something that contradicts a lifelong belief and is trying to decide whether the belief or the thing they have just seen is real. He looked, Vexel thought, like a man sitting with a question he did not want to ask because he was afraid of the answer. Vexel understood exactly how he felt. He needed to contact Earth's diplomatic office. He had been composing the message in the back of his mind for the last several minutes. In the distracted way a person composes a message they are not yet ready to send. He needed to ask them, in professional language, how many people they had liked this one. He was not ready for the answer. He sent the message anyway. Outside the chamber, Lily Carter was rolling her shoulders again. Light and unhurried, the way she had rolled them before the gravity well, looking at the door of the next section with mild interest. The same expression she had looking at the restaurant menu in her file photograph. Pleasant, curious, already thinking about something else. The Krogthun Warbeast section loaded. 8 tons of armored biology. Plasma-resistant. Tissue that repaired itself in real time. A theoretical weak point in the dorsal plating had been proposed in scientific literature 40 years ago and had never, in any field engagement or any controlled assessment, been successfully exploited. The Warbeast itself had never been stopped in the chamber by any species that had reached it. It was the last standard section before the final stage. Vexel watched the door open. His 3 hearts had been running loud and out of sync since the gravity well. He had stopped noticing them individually. They were simply a single sustained pressure behind his sternum, loud and constant, the way rain on a roof becomes part of the background after a while. He thought about the diplomatic message he had sent. He thought about what the answer might say. He did not want to think about it. He thought about it anyway, because that was the shape his mind took now, pressing against the edge of something it could not yet fully see. Lily walked through the door. The Warbeast roared before the door was fully open. The sound hit the observation deck through 6 centimeters of rated composite shielding, and 2 of the technicians stepped back from it without meaning to. Vexel had been in the room the first time the Warbeast was tested in this chamber, and he had thought then that it was the most purely threatening sound he had ever heard. He had been correct. He still was. He had just never imagined hearing it alongside the question of whether the person on the other side of the door would find it worth noticing. Lily found it worth noticing. She stopped walking and looked toward the sound the way a person stops on a street corner to check if that was actually thunder or just a truck. Then she walked through the door. The Warbeast was already charging. It had been deployed mid-sprint, which was standard for this section. No run-up period, no adjustment time, maximum first contact pressure. 8 tons of forward momentum, armored from the skull plating to the heel joints, accelerating toward her across 40 meters of open floor. She watched it come. 30 meters, 20. The floor shook on the observation deck, a deep, regular percussion Vexel felt through his boots. 10 meters, 5. She was not moving. At the last possible moment she jumped forward and up, planted 1 foot on the lowered skull plate, and used it as a launch platform. The Warbeast's charge carried it under her. She flipped over its back and came down on its shoulders, landing in a crouch, knees gripping the armor ridges on either side of the neck. The Warbeast did what the Warbeast always did when something landed on its back. It tried to remove the thing. It slammed into the left wall. It drove its bulk into the right wall. It bucked and twisted and dropped 1 shoulder and tried to roll. Lily moved with it the whole time, adjusting her grip the way a climber adjusts on rock, always finding the next hold, always distributing weight so the next throw couldn't get full purchase. She was watching the back of its neck. The way it breathed told me where its lungs were, she would say later in the debrief, with the patient manner of someone explaining something they consider obvious. The way it held its head told me where the main vessels were. It's just observation. Vexel watched her hand find the spot. The exact spot. The theoretical location that 40 years of scientific literature had placed at a junction of 4 armor plates at the back of the neck, in a gap 3 centimeters wide, at an angle that required approaching from above and behind while the animal was in motion. The spot that no candidate in any assessment, under any conditions, had ever found in the field. She found it in 2 seconds of watching. She placed the blade between the plates and pushed it in with steady, even pressure. The same economy she had used for everything else, no drama, no force beyond what the moment required. The warbeast's legs locked. It swayed. Then it lowered itself to the floor with a sound like a building settling, slow and complete, and lay still. Lily climbed down. She took the cloth from her pocket, wiped the blade, sat down on the deactivated creature's side, one knee up, the way a person sits on a low wall while they wait for something. "Sorry for taking so long," she said to the observation camera. "The skin was quite tough. I had to think about where to put the blade." 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Director Viscara sat down in a chair. She did it without looking for the chair first, which meant her body had found it on its own while her attention was elsewhere. Her attention was on the screen. It stayed there. Threxar stood up from the back bench. He had been sitting since the stalker section. He stood up now and walked to the front of the observation deck and stood next to Vexel and looked at the screen, and then he sat down again on the floor because the bench was too far away and he did not have the constitution for a longer walk right now. He put his face in his hands. He was not making a sound. His shoulders were moving. Threxar was weeping. A 3-conflict veteran. A warrior whose name appeared in the official military histories of 2 separate species. Sitting on the floor of the Bureau observation deck, face in his hands, because a small human had cleared the Krogthun warbeast in 3 minutes and 12 seconds and apologized for the time it took. Vexel did not say anything. There was nothing appropriate to say. His system pinged. A message from Clichter, who had gone to the secondary monitoring station to manage the feeds. The message read, "The system is asking me to confirm the final section. I don't know if I should confirm it. I'm asking you." The final section. Vexel had known it was coming. He had been not thinking about it for the last 40 minutes, holding it at the edge of attention the way a person holds the thought of an appointment they don't want to keep. The Ifvari prototype. It was not on the official candidate list. It was not rated for non-confirmed species. The unit had been requested for the Class 9 chamber by a special research committee 6 months ago, cleared through 3 separate oversight reviews, and installed with the notation that it was to be deployed only when a candidate had demonstrated confirmed peak warrior ability across all standard sections. No candidate in 6 months had reached the activation threshold. The threshold had now been reached. Vexel typed back, "Confirm." He reached for the emergency stop panel and kept his hand near it, not touching it, a few centimeters from the surface, just near it. The Ifvari prototype stepped out of the rear panel, and the camera feed stuttered. The cameras on every other section had tracked Lily without difficulty. She moved fast, but she moved in ways that had logic to them, ways that a lens could learn and follow. The Ifvari unit moved in a way that broke the tracking algorithm's assumptions. It didn't move in arcs or lines. It moved in something closer to the negative space between arcs, as if it had identified where a camera expected it to be and had already chosen somewhere else. The feed showed Lily standing, the unit somewhere in the room. Then the unit was very close to her, and the first strike came in at her head, and she was not there. And that was the beginning of the hardest 30 seconds of the assessment. Vexel pressed closer to the screen. His 3 hearts were running loud and wrong. For the first 30 seconds, it looked like the unit was winning. It was faster than anything else in the chamber had been, faster than the stalker, faster than the drones, faster by a margin that the sensors could log but the cameras could not fully render. The gravity blades swept in combinations that forced Lily sideways and back, each one requiring a different response, and the neural disruptor came in on the half-beat between the blades' arcs, so that she had to deal with two separate threat timings at once. She took a cut on her left arm. She took another on her cheek. She was moving in an increasingly small circle, which in every previous engagement with every previous candidate had indicated that the candidate was running out of space. Threxar looked up from the floor. His face was still wet. "No species in the galaxy," he said, and his voice was very quiet, "can keep dodging that combination. Not for long." It was the first full sentence he had spoken in 20 minutes. Director Viscara did not respond. Clichter did not respond. No one responded because they were all watching the screen and they all knew Threxar had spent most of this assessment being wrong, and they did not know whether to hope he was wrong again or to prepare for the other thing. Lily stopped moving backward. It was a small thing, a shift of weight, almost invisible on the feed. She planted her back foot differently and her shoulders dropped a fraction, and the way she held the blade changed. She held it lower and more loosely, the way someone holds a pen when they're about to write rather than when they're carrying it across a room. She was smiling. A small smile, shy almost, the smile of someone who has just understood a joke. "Oh," she said, "I see what you're doing." She stepped inside the next gravity blade arc, too close for it to function at full extension. The unit recalibrated, which took a fraction of a second, and in that fraction she had the disruptor wrist redirected, and the unit's own momentum carried the arm into a rotation it had not chosen. "Clever timing on the disruptor," she said. "Very clever, let's try this properly." One small cut, the unit's right arm went still. Second small cut, the unit stumbled, one knee dropping. "Every fighter, no matter how great, has a rhythm," she said, not loudly. "The way someone says something they have been told a long time ago and have found repeatedly to be true. Once you find it, they can't hide from you anymore." She moved to the back of the neck. One final cut. The point was precise enough that, when the sensors logged it later, 3 separate engineers would ask whether the reading was corrupted, because the blade had found a neural cluster that the unit's designers had not marked on the external specification. The Ifvari prototype folded. Not fell, folded, joints unlocking in sequence, settling to the floor with a care that looked almost deliberate, like a puppet whose strings were released slowly, one at a time, by someone who wanted to do it gently. The chamber sensors read, "All hostiles deactivated, assessment complete." Lily tied a piece of cloth around her arm, made a note in her notebook, looked around the chamber once, the same checking the restaurant for forgotten things expression, satisfied herself that everything was as it should be. She walked toward the exit corridor, paused at the camera mounted near the door, and gave it a small wave. "Thank you for the test," she said. "It was good exercise. I felt a bit rusty at the start, but I think I got into it by the end. Sorry it was over so quickly. I was trying to make my mum's call on time." A brief pause. "Have a lovely day." She walked out. Total time, 2 hours and 47 minutes. Vexel looked at that figure for a long time. The previous record was Korak the Iron Heart, whose time had stood for 40 years. Korak had been given a commendation by 3 separate galactic councils for the achievement. The achievement was now 47 minutes slower than what had just happened. His hand was still near the emergency stop. He had not pressed it. She had asked him not to stop the test, and he had not, and he was trying to decide whether that had been the right call or simply the call that had left him standing here with his 3 hearts in a state he had no name for. His system pinged again. Reply received from Earth Diplomatic Office. Vexel looked at the message notification for a moment before opening it, in the way a person looks at a door before opening it when they are not sure what is on the other side. He opened it. He read it. He read it again. Director Viscara was at his shoulder. He did not know when she had moved. "Vexel," she said. He handed her the terminal. The message was 12 lines long. Vexel had expected something longer, something that matched the scale of what he had just watched. 12 lines felt wrong, the way a small envelope feels wrong when you know it contains something that will change things. Director Viscara read it. Then she set the terminal on the console between them and stood very still. The message read, "Lieutenant Carter is considered to be of normal physical ability for a soldier of her age and training. We have many like her, and many more who are stronger. We hope the assessment was satisfactory. Please let us know if there is anything else we can assist with. Normal physical ability. Many like her. Many more who are stronger." Vexel read the lines again, then again. He was looking for the part where the phrasing was diplomatic, where normal meant something different from normal, where many was a polite exaggeration of a small number. He did not find that part. The message had the tone of a helpful administrative office answering a routine query. It had been sent within 3 minutes. No one on the other end had appeared to find the question unusual. Every rung of the last 2 hours and 47 minutes rearranged itself in his mind. The gravity well in 12 seconds, normal. The stalker in 47 seconds, normal. The warbeast in 3 minutes and 12 seconds, weak point found by observation alone in 2 seconds, a thing 40 years of science had never managed, normal. The Ifvari prototype disabled with 3 cuts and a smile, normal. He looked at the observation deck. The other observers were still there, still quiet. Threxar had not stood up from the floor. Clichter was at the secondary station with the expression of someone who has stopped trying to process and is simply recording on instinct, because processing will have to come later. "Vexel," Director Viscara said. "I know," he said. "We need to speak with her." The debrief room was small and practical. A table, 4 chairs, a recording panel. They had put a carafe of water on the table and a cup of tea that someone had thought to add, which Vexel noted and appreciated, because small practical kindnesses were easier to do than large impossible ones, and right now he had nothing large or possible to offer. Lily Carter was already in the room when he arrived. She had changed out of the assessment fatigues. Her arm was bandaged from the Ifvari cut, neatly done, and there was a small dressing on her cheek. She had the notebook on the table in front of her, closed. The blade was clipped at her hip, resting there the way it had rested the entire assessment, not displayed, just carried, the way you carry something you are used to having with you. She was drinking the tea. She looked up when Vexel came in, and smiled the way people smile when they see someone they've caused a small inconvenience for and feel mildly bad about it. "Hello again," she said. "I hope I didn't make too much of a mess in there. Some of those drones hit the walls quite hard." Vexel sat down across from her. Director Viscara sat beside him. He had brought a recording pad. He put it on the table and looked at it for a moment, because looking at her directly required a kind of mental preparation he was still assembling. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, "I'd like to ask you some questions about what we observed today." "Of course," she said, "though I'm not sure I'll be very helpful. I just did what the sections asked." "You completed the Class 9 assessment in 2 hours and 47 minutes. She looked slightly worried. "Was that too fast? I am very sorry, I didn't realize there was a minimum time. Should I have waited longer between the sections?" This was Hook 29, the pre-climax mundane beat. She was worried about pace, about politeness, about whether she had been rude to the test by finishing it too quickly. Vexel became aware that his professional composure, which had survived 300 years of interstellar diplomacy, was under a kind of pressure it had never encountered before. The previous record, he said carefully, was 6 hours and 12 minutes. A pause. Oh, she said then, I'm sorry, I didn't know. How did you find the weak point on the Krogthun warbeast? The breathing, she said, and the way it held its head. Once you know roughly where the lungs are, you know where the main vessels have to be, and that tells you where the structural weak points are under the plating. It's just observation. My nan used to say, don't think too much about it, just look at what's actually there. Vexel wrote something on his pad. He was not sure what he wrote. He looked at it afterward and it said breathing. The Zorvath apex stalker, he said. You heard it at 12 meters. It was breathing through its mouth, she said. Quite large lungs, I think. I could hear it very clearly. Nothing to be done about it really if that's just how the species breathes, but in an assessment context, it's something to be aware of. She said this the way you might say it about a colleague who tapped their pen during meetings, sympathetically, as a passing observation. Lieutenant Carter, Director Viscara said, are you the strongest human soldier you know? Lily thought about this. She looked at the ceiling briefly, in the way of someone running through a list. No, she said, not even close. My sergeant would probably do the course in half the time, honestly. And there are training programs, specialist programs, where the candidates are considerably more capable than I am. I'm quite ordinary, really, just average for my role. The 3 hits of the climax triad landed quietly, without drama, in the debrief room of a bureau facility in the middle of an unremarkable Tuesday. She was ordinary. There were many like her. There were many more who were stronger. Director Viscara asked, in a voice that was entirely steady, could you tell us about your military, in general terms? Lily told them. 25 million active soldiers, 50 million in reserve, veterans with 30 and 40 years of service who still taught at the training programs. The specialist programs, she described their entry requirements as somewhat unpleasant, and their completion rates as not very high. Retired officers in their 70s who still maintain their skills because, as she put it, once you've trained for that long it's just how you move through the world, isn't it? Vexel's hands went flat on the table. He did not mean to do it. His palms simply found the surface and stayed there, the way a person steadies themselves on something solid when the ground changes under them. Director Viscara did not move at all, which was its own kind of reaction. 25 million. He thought about Lily Carter, rated as average, clearing the Ifvari prototype with 3 cuts and a smile. He multiplied that by 25 million, and then he remembered there were 50 million more in reserve, and then he stopped multiplying because the exercise was not producing useful information, only a specific kind of vertigo he had no prior experience of. The test itself, Lily said, looking at her tea, was good, though, very well designed. Whoever did the gravity section, the bit with the ceiling drones, that was clever. I liked that one. Tell them I thought it was clever. Vexel became aware, in a distant way, that he needed to stand up, that there were things that needed to happen next, calls to make, reports to file, a council session to convene. He was aware of all of this the way you are aware of tasks waiting when you have not yet finished processing the thing that made those tasks necessary. He looked at the blade at her hip. She had wiped it on a cloth when she climbed down from the warbeast. He thought about the file note he had written 3 days ago, will not be sufficient for Class 9 conditions. He had been wrong about that. He had been wrong about everything that seemed adjacent to it. Lieutenant Carter, he said, is there anything you need before you go? Transport arrangements. Oh, I'm fine, she said, already gathering her notebook. I've got the transit card. I should ring my mum. I told her I'd call by 4 and it's nearly 1:30. She stood up, tucking the notebook away. Paused. Will you be all right? You both look a bit peaky. We will be fine, Director Viscara said. Good. She picked up the blade, checked the clip with a small automatic gesture, the way you check a coat button before going out into weather, and smiled at them both. Thank you very much for having me. It was a lovely facility. She walked out. The door closed. The room was quiet. The council met 3 times in the week that followed. Recordings were distributed to every member species, with Bureau authentication codes. The Drenar hegemony, which had not sent a personal message to any institution in 40 years, sent one. The Krell Confederacy offered permanent observer seats. The Voran Republic sent 3 words, "Please remember us." Some species claimed the recording was fabricated. Their requests for further assessment testing were declined, politely, by Director Viscara, in a letter that thanked them for their interest. Director Viscara and Vexel sat alone in the observation deck on the 4th evening, after everyone else had gone. She told him what he already knew, that proposals to pressure test humanity by force had been blocked at the last council session by a margin thin enough to name individually. "We have been very, very lucky," she said. Vexel thought about 75 million trained humans, about 30-year veterans who still taught, about specialist programs with completion rates that were not very high, which meant the ones who completed them were, by some measure he did not have a frame for, more capable than the ones who did not. He thought about a retired officer in their 70s, who still moved through the world the way Lily Carter moved through a Class 9 assessment chamber, because that was just how they moved now. He did not finish the thought. There was no useful end to it. Viscara ordered the Class 10 design work to begin the following morning. Lily Carter was, by then, already home. She had made the phone call. Her mother had asked how the test went, and she had said it was fine, quite good actually, and that the facility had very nice ceiling lights that Marcus would have liked. She brought biscuits from the cafeteria for her mum because she had eaten the ones from the paper bag herself during transit. The Bureau's automated equipment report filed the day after the assessment contained one line for her personal equipment. Personal blade, non-standard, unclassified. Sufficient. Vexel read that line 4 times. 1 week after the assessment, Clichter came through the observation deck door at a pace that, for Clichter, constituted running. He was holding a data pad. All 4 eyes were open. "Sir," he said, "Earth has sent another one." Vexel took the pad. The file read, Hill Margaret, age 73, Yorkshire, retired schoolteacher, no military training, no special designation, no prior assessment history. Under notes in the handwriting of the Earth Diplomatic Office's intake coordinator, Mrs. Hill read about Lieutenant Carter's assessment in the newspaper and would like to try. We advised her that the process might be too strenuous. She informed us that we were being silly. We thought it best to let her come. A second note added below, special request, permission to bring her own walking stick. Permission granted. Vexel put the pad down on the console. He stood there for a moment. Then he said to no one in particular, "Begin Class 11 design plans." He went to meet her. She was in the waiting room at the end of the intake corridor, a small woman in a gray cardigan, walking stick across her knees, a tin of biscuits on the table beside her. She was reading something on a fold of paper she had brought herself. She looked up when Vexel appeared in the doorway and waved. The wave was friendly and unhurried, the wave of someone who has been waiting comfortably and is in no particular rush. She looked harmless. Vexel stood in the doorway of the intake room and looked at the file on his pad and looked at Margaret Hill, 73, retired, tin of biscuits, walking stick, Yorkshire, and thought about a small human in black fatigues who had apologized for finishing the hardest test in the galaxy too quickly, because she was worried about being late for her mum's phone call. She had finished the hardest test in the galaxy. She had been worried about being late for her mum.